Hello everyone and welcome to my art studio. I'm Amy, the artist behind Winterwood Studio, and today we have a super fun video. This is my ultimate no holds barred list of can't live without art supplies. These are my most favorite, the ones I wouldn't want to give up, the ones I'd take on a deserted island with me. These are the actual art supplies that transform my creativity and make my projects pop. I work primarily in watercolor, gouache, acrylics, and mixed media, so we will be looking at the supplies that you would be using for that today. So get yourself a nice cozy drink, come on in, and let's chat for a bit. Having a must-have art supply setup is essential for every artist, whether you're a beginner or an experienced one. It's like having a trusted sidekick that helps you bring your creative vision to life. I know from personal experience that having the right tools and taking the time to really get to know them can make all the difference in the world. So let's dive in and explore what's inside my art supply toolkit. I've got everything out. I'm ready to show it all to you. There's a ton of cool supplies here. I've invested so much time and effort and money into building my art supply toolkit, and I'm really excited to share it with you today. It's not just a collection of random supplies. This is my carefully curated selection of must-haves that have really helped me take my art to the next level. It's actually taken me years to figure out what works the best and what I like the most, and I've wasted a ton of money and time doing that, and I don't want you to have to do the same. I'm more than happy to share all that I've learned with you guys. If I can help you in any way, that's why I'm here. So there's going to be like a ton of supplies in this video. They'll all be linked down below in case you want to get any of them for yourself. I'm also going to have timestamps down below just in case you want to jump around or there's a section you aren't really interested in. So we're going to start by talking about watercolor supplies. Watercolor might be my most favorite medium. It's maybe a tie between that and gouache. I also feel like the supplies for watercolor are the most important because if you use the wrong watercolor supplies, you just won't get the same effects that you want. Okay, so you can see I'm set up with my watercolors. Now, this video is the stuff that I use pretty much every single day or, regularly. My must-haves, the stuff that I wouldn't want to be without. It's not going to include stuff I only use like some of the time or new stuff I've discovered this year, which is we're nearing the end of 2024. If you want to see like a video, like a wrap-up video, like new stuff I discovered in 2024 that I'm loving or something, drop it down in the comments so I know. But this is the stuff that, like, as you can see, like, I use till I use up and then replace. So we're starting with watercolors. And I'm not going to include, like, the pen and ink, or like stuff like that. That'll be in the mixed media section, which I'll have timestamps down below if you want to jump around. This is just the very basics. So we'll start with, so when you have your finished drawing and you want to transfer it to your watercolor paper, I always use a light pad. If I want to come in with colored pencil, and again, I'll talk about the colored pencils in the mixed media section, or if I am using like a block and I don't want to take the watercolor paper off the block, then I'll use the Seural transfer paper. This is very special transfer paper. It's completely wax free. It comes in multiple colors. I have it in red, blue, white, and this gray graphite color, which is actually the one I use the least. I tend to use the red and the blue the most. I use this for watercolor and for acrylics, like transferring my drawing to the acrylic canvas. This is special because it is erasable. It's like a powdery fine transfer paper. It does not leave wax, so like your watercolors won't bead up on top of it. And you can, like I said, erase it. This is the best transfer paper I've ever found. Do not use carbon paper because your watercolors will bead on top of it, as will your acrylics. So this light pad that I use, it's like a diamond painting light pad. I bought it for like $11 on Amazon, but the last time I checked, they were selling it for, I think, $40. So I'm not going to link this exact one because I feel like it's way overpriced now, but I'll find one and link it to down below in the description. Everything will be linked below in case you want to try any of these products yourself. So once I have it transferred, well, first let's talk about paper. This is my favorite paper. I use Arches Hot Press a lot and Arches Cold Press. I love the Arches Cold Press. I will never use any other kind of cold press other than Arches. However, I'm not as big of a fan of the Arches hot press, and I've been experimenting to try to find a hot press that I like more. This one, I did a gouache painting on this week. I really enjoy this one. So the problem with, one of the problems I have with hot press is even like, washi tape will pull up the edges of the paper, and it did do that for this as well. So I have to do more experiments to see which one I like better. And then this is a very interestingly textured paper. At first I wasn't sure how I felt like it, or how I felt about it. It's almost like when I was putting down the first wash, it was almost like you could see the lines forming in it, although you can't see them. Well, you can see them a little bit in the finished piece, in the where I went over it with like colored pencil and the shading. I haven't tested this with washi tape, so I do need to do that. But you'll have to pry my Arches cold press out of my cold dead hands because I won't ever use any other cold press other than Arches. I love it that much. So, like I said, hot press, I'm still experimenting. So now we're going to move on to paints, and you can probably see that I have a preferred brand of paint. I do actually have other paints, but this is my favorite brand. And I know that there's some people out here that I mean, there was a big hullabaloo with a scandal, but I love these paints, and I'm not gonna switch to a different brand. So I love them. I will say I do want to try the Schminke watercolors. I have a couple of those, and if I were gonna switch to any brand, I'd think it would maybe be that one. I've tried the Sennelier, Winsor Newton. I don't think I've tried the Holbein, which I would like to. I have a watercolor video up where I tried all the different brands. I'll link that down below if I remember to, so you can check it out. It's like a battle of watercolors. But so you may be asking, why do you have so many? So I have two palettes here. This is my Daniel Smith transparent palette, and all the colors, and that's what these colors, I'm trying to keep them separate. These are all their most transparent colors. I would like to build a palette with transparent staining colors, but I haven't done that yet. So, for example, when I'm doing a illustration where I want the brightness of the paper to shine through and I really don't want any muddiness of color, I'll use the transparent palette. I painted this with the transparent palette. You can see it's got a nice luminous sparkle to it. However, if I don't need something super transparent, then this is my regular palette, and there are you know, definitely colors in here that are not transparent. Ooh, how did that get in there? But still lovely colors. So it really just depends on what you're doing. Also, these are all non-granulating as well, and these are, a lot of them have granulation. Like Under the Sea Green is one of my most favorite colors, but it's granulating, so it's not in this palette. I think I have videos up for when I set up this palette. I'm not 100% sure. I do like to, so as you'll see in all my palettes of paint, gouache, and acrylic, and watercolor, that will be the other two that are coming up, I like a split primary palette. I like to have a cool and a warm of each color. Or sometimes I have more. But I like to have a cool and a warm of each color, and I find you can get the biggest range of mixing like that. And my little pet Dita is over there drinking water, and I'm pretty sure the microphone's probably picking it up, so sorry about that. Yeah, so those are my favorite paints. And I think that's everything I wanted to color in the watercolor section, because we're going to talk about the stuff I use with it. Oh, brushes, duh. Okay, so these are my most favorite brushes. I am most enjoying, I'm just going to take them out so you can see my favorites. Okay, so I like these brushes the most, and then I love this brush, but okay, we'll have to talk about this. Okay, so these are the brushes that I love the most. Everything here is from Princeton except for this one, and in fact, all the brushes that I like are from Princeton, and I'm not sponsored or affiliated with them in any way. I just like their brushes. We'll talk about gouache and acrylic brushes in a minute, but I find that watercolor brushes are probably one of your more important brushes. Like with acrylic, it doesn't matter as much, but that's why I have 3 different kinds of brushes from Princeton. So what you see here is the Princeton Neptune, the Princeton Velvet Touch, and the Princeton Aqua Elite. Now the reason I have different brushes is because in general I prefer a snappier brush. And here, I'm trying to get it to focus. So this is the Aqua Elite. This is a snappier brush. It holds a nice amount of liquid. But it still has a little bit of snap to it. And this is what I would generally use for most painting purposes. However, when I'm doing like big background washes, or if I'm doing details, then I'll switch to this. This is the Princeton Neptune, and you can see it's much softer. It doesn't really snap as much. It's very soft, almost like a makeup brush. I don't use this bigger one very much, but what I do is I go through these Princeton Neptune, like the 0 round, like cotton candy. I don't know. These are my favorite detail brushes in a variety of sizes. They hold so much liquid, like way more than you would think, and you can just go through and do like all the feathers on a, well, not all the feathers on a bird, but you can do the feathers on the bird with these brushes without having to constantly go back and forth to reload your brush. These are my favorite detail brushes for that specific reason. Now, one of my watercolor friends told me to try the Princeton Velvet Touch. She said she felt like it was kind of a mix of the two, although a little snappier than the Aqua Elite. And I haven't done a ton of testing, like in-depth testing yet, but I can already tell you I am loving this very much. This is the Princeton Velvet Touch. I'm enjoying it very much. I had already had for washes the Princeton Velvet Touch, the big flat, but I hadn't tried any of the rounds. So I got the round and also an angular shader. I don't know why. I don't tend to use flat brushes in watercolor unless I'm doing like a wash. Now, I love these brushes too. However, these are the silver black velvet. All the Princeton brushes that we just saw are synthetic. The silver black velvet, when I bought it, I thought it was synthetic, but it's not. It's a mix of synthetic and squirrel hair. I personally, like I just said, I have a pet ferret, and Sable is related to a ferret, and for personal reasons, I don't tend to use the natural brushes for that reason. I don't have any problem if you decide you do want to use them. Like I've heard, the most expensive brushes are the Kolinsky Sable, and they're supposed to be absolutely spectacular, but I have not used one, and I don't plan to use one just because of it would be too much like making a brush out of my pet. So, but again, no judgment. If you want to use them, that's fine. I do love the silver black velvet, and I will use it until they are no good anymore, but I doubt that I will replace them for the reasons I just stated. So, okay, you guys, if you're looking for a teacher for watercolors, I'm going to suggest that you check out Anna Buccarelli. I've learned more from her than anyone else. She has several classes up on Skillshare that I've taken, and when I say several, I mean like 10. I highly recommend them all. And actually, so when Skillshare reached out and wanted to sponsor today's video, I said, yes, please, it's absolutely perfect. A huge thank you goes out to Skillshare for sponsoring today's video. Just in case you haven't heard of Skillshare, Skillshare is the largest online community for creatives with thousands of classes led by industry experts across film, illustration, design, freelance, productivity, and more. Skillshare can help you take your career, skills, hobbies, passions, or side hustles to the next level. Not only can you learn watercolor, you can learn how to tweak your painting with a little digital magic, like with a class on Procreate or Photoshop. And then you can learn how to sell your art by taking classes about business and entrepreneurship that will help any artist reach their business goals, whether it's marketing, learning how to conquer social media, or designing and selling your own print-on-demand products. I've taken almost all of Anna Buccarelli's Skillshare classes, and I especially liked her Watercolor Roses Pro Techniques Explained class. It's actually a really comprehensive class for anyone wanting to learn to paint botanical paintings. I'm also taking her class, How to Secure High-Profile Brand Partnerships, next, and I'm super, super excited. And so that you guys can take a class too if you want, Skillshare has been nice enough to give us a special link. The first 500 people to use my link that I'll put down in the description box down below will receive a 1-month free trial of Skillshare. So get started learning today. And now back to talking about my must-have supplies. The next one we're going to talk about is gouache. So gouache is somewhat similar to watercolor depending on what kind you use. A lot of people will say that it's basically opaque watercolors, and I can see why they would say that, as they can be used that way, but to me they're not the same. I use both original, like designer's gouache and acrylic gouache, and they're very different, and we will switch now to the overhead cam, and I'm going to give you a close-up look at my must-have gouache supplies and everything you need to get started with gouache. Okay, so now we're on to my gouache supplies. Now, I like both acrylic and regular gouache. We'll talk about a little bit about why. We're going to start with regular gouache or designer's gouache or original gouache, whatever you want to call it. It is the gouache that is re-wettable. So if you are painting with it and you let a layer dry and you come back in and go in with another layer over it, that bottom layer will reactivate, and that is the original gouache. Original gouache, so a lot of people struggle with original gouache because of that it will reactivate. I'll have a couple tips to share with you in the video on how to deal with that here in a minute. But first let's talk about regular gouache. So let's start by moving some stuff out of the way. All right, this is a shout out. I don't use this as much anymore. However, if you are just getting into gouache or you want to try it and you're not sure if you're going to like it, ooh, there's some mold there. That wasn't moldy last week. That's sad. I'll have to scoop that out. So this is my Himi gouache. This is, I think, the second set that I had. I still use this in my sketchbook, or if I don't want to have a big no muss, no fuss setup. If I don't feel like doing a lot of setup and cleanup, I will often still use this. I just wet it like this once a week to keep it moist so it doesn't dry out. I've had this one for over a year, and this is the first little bit of mold I had, and it's probably because I haven't used it in the last 2 weeks. Normally, as long as I use it once a week, it stays fine. But I have not used this in the last week. So this is not an essential supply anymore, but it is the best quality beginner's gouache that I've found or whatever. So I wanted to do a shout out for that. If you want to get started and you want to try gouache without breaking the bank, then that's what I would recommend. However, if you want something that's a little bit higher quality, then I would recommend something where you don't have to worry about mold or wetting it. I would recommend this. This is, and this is why I haven't used the Himi. So I've started to use this almost exclusively in my sketchbook. Ooh, I lost the brush for it. It comes with a brush. It's probably in one of my brush cups. Most of these are light fast, but not all of them. This magenta isn't, and I'm not sure about the purple. And you can buy replacement pans, I think, to fill this up again. It re-wets beautifully. It is nice and opaque. It's meant to re-wet and use as gouache. And it is great in sketchbooks and for painting and plein air. And I think this runs about $30, and I've mostly switched to this for sketchbook work, which is why that Himi has some mold in it. Okay, but now if you want artist, professional artist level, actually before we get into that, I will also say you're going to want a spray bottle of water, especially if you're working with acrylic paint. I'll link that down below. Not acrylic paint, acrylic gouache. And especially with acrylic gouache, you're going to want a Stay Wet palette of some sort. This is my Masterson's Stay Wet Handy palette, the tiny one. I also have the giant one that you'll see with my acrylics if I remembered to dig it out. If you're using rewettable gouache, then you can use, or original gouache, something like this. And I just emptied my water cup, but if I wet this brush, and then you can see that this reactivates rather nicely. This is, well, we'll talk about what it is in a minute. I don't even have any paper here. Here, we'll put it on my notes for the video. But it is a, when you're working with the original gouache, you can use it thin like watercolors, or you can let this sit and it'll get thick and nice again. Boy, that's a pretty color. I forgot what I was saying. What am I saying? Yeah, so I keep a palette like this, or I use palette paper for the original gouache that you can re-wet it. Doesn't matter if it dries, you just wet it and you can work with it again. But for acrylic gouache, you're going to need something like this to keep it from drying out. Otherwise, you will struggle with it. And I'm telling you that from experience. Okay, so now on to the paint. So, let's do this. So the first original rewettable gouache that I tried was the Winsor & Newton Designer, and I do still really like this. They're light fast rated. They have the pigment numbers on the back, the light fast rating on the back. They're all opaque. It is a good original gouache. I've gone through tons of this, and I still do enjoy it. However, I recently tried the Holbein Artist Gouache, and that pretty color you just saw me mixing was this one. And I am probably going to switch to this. It is less stiff, more opaque, and I struggled less with the under layers reactivating. So my tips, first of all, for working with this is, if you're going to do work in layers, do your first layer and then let it dry thoroughly. So like overnight. And then you come back in with your next layers and you don't scrub at it. You put it down in one clean, thick stroke and you leave it and you don't touch it. You can also work from thin to thick like you would with oil pastels. So the bottom layers can be more, if you don't need a thick, opaque, velvety finish, the bottom layers can be mixed with more water. So they're more of a watercolor type consistency that will set better in the paper than the thicker, and then you can build up on it over that. Some people, even with those tips, will still struggle with the bottom layers reactivating. I found when I tried the Holbein's Artist Gouache that it did not reactivate as easily as the Winsor & Newton's Designer's Gouache. So it was easier for me to work with. It was also, like I said, not as stiff and more opaque, and also very, very pigmented. Just a tiny bit of paint, like the magenta to tincture white, it'll take you really far. So I actually feel like I'd probably end up using less of this than I would with that. So even though this is a touch pricier, it might equal out. I don't know. I also had problems with the Winsor & Newton molding really bad in my wet palette, whereas, you know, that's the first time in the Chemia I've ever seen mold. I haven't tried a wet palette with the Holbein because it's little and new, so I'll have to keep you updated on that. I do think I have a birthday gift card coming because it's my birthday, and I do think I may upgrade because I really did enjoy these. And this whole video where I'm trying these and seeing what I think will be up, I think, next week here on my channel. Unless something goes wrong, it should be up next weekend. Holbein sent me these. It was very nice of them. So, yeah, so now on to the acrylic gouache. So, I have a whole lot of Turner acrylic gouache here. Turner is much cheaper than the other brands of acrylic gouache, and it's a decent paint. However, I would say it's more of an intermediate level than a professional level, especially after using the Holbein acrylic gouache. Again, the pigmentation just isn't the same. I found that it was also stiffer than the Holbein, a little bit harder to work with. And the hardest thing with the Turner acrylic gouache is it dries super, super, super fast. So even with the Masterson Stay Wet palette, and my spray bottle and all that, it was drying super fast, like really fast, and it was really, really hard to work with. So, again, I may be upgrading. We'll have to see. I'll have to keep you updated. However, if you are looking to get into acrylic gouache, then I do highly recommend the Turner Acryl Gouache. You can buy sets on Amazon. The only place you can buy the open stock tubes is on Jerry's Artorama. They have excellent sales there on the Turner. So I think last year, all of these little ones were in sets of like 12. There was one called Earth and one that was called Dream, and I can't remember the third one, but they were sets of 12, and they're normally like $24, and they're like $24 on Amazon. But on Jerry's during that sale, they were 50% off, and the same for their individual tubes. I will still use these. I mean, obviously they're still nice paints, and I enjoy them, but I do think that I'll probably upgrade at some point because these were easier for me to work with. These just dry out super fast, so but still nice paints. So let me think. The last thing we have to cover is brushes. I tend to use more filberts and flats and then detail brushes than I do rounds, like I do with watercolor. Again, my favorites are going to be the Princeton Select. So this would be, these are also, I use the, so there's, I have my regular gouache brushes and then my acrylic gouache brushes. I don't switch them because the regular gouache does act a little bit more like a watercolor, and you want like nice soft bristles, and you don't want to get like an acrylic paint dried in the brush. So I do keep separate brushes for them, and otherwise it's the Princeton Selects, and then whatever. The brushes don't matter quite as much for gouache as they do with watercolor, but I do still think that at some point I'd like to get some nice detail brushes because I'm not super happy with the detail brushes that I have right now. So those are the brushes for, and all the supplies for gouache. Nope, I forgot. That is not all the supplies for gouache. There's paper. So I will use the hot press paper that you saw me show already in the watercolor section, Arches or Fabriano or Stonehenge, but also I will often paint on Bristol. I would like to try their 500 series. I haven't yet. This is the 400 series. I do like to paint. It's a thick Bristol. It's very smooth. You're not going to get like the same amount of layers as you would with hot press, and if you're using really wet techniques, this might not be the best paper to use, but it is awesome for if you're doing like real thick layers or even like thin washes of paint. It does curl, but I have a super secret way to fix curled watercolor paper, and I also have a video for that is already up, and I'll link it down below so you can check it out. Now we're on to acrylics. Acrylics have become like my go-to paint for painting on canvases. A lot of you who have been around my channel for a while know that I originally went to art school many years ago for oil painting, mainly landscapes, and that I had to leave without finishing when I got sick with my autoimmune disease. I do still paint with oils, and I have developed a non-toxic way of painting with them, but I definitely reach for my acrylics more often now, especially now that I've really gotten a hang of how to paint with acrylics. So let's get a close-up look at some of my favorite acrylic supplies. Okay, so now we're on to my acrylic paint section. Just to cover the brushes, so the acrylic gouache brushes are also the brushes I use for acrylic painting. These are all my short-handled brushes for using on my desk up here. I do have long-handled brushes in my little downstairs studio with my big easel, but I hurt my knee and I can't go down the stairs right now, so I can't show them to you. Again, my favorite brand of acrylic brushes is the Princeton Select. I have some other ones that are more expensive, and I keep going back to the Princeton Select. I'm trying to see if I have any of the more expensive ones to show you. Nope, that's not it. The Liquitex brushes. Is this a Liquitex? Yeah, the Liquitex basic brushes aren't bad either. I have a few of those too. So that's the brushes. So now let's talk about, again, you're gonna need a spray bottle of water, and my favorite medium is the satin glazing liquid from Golden, the slow drying extender. This is a game changer for me. It has made it so much easier to paint with acrylics. I use it all the time. And just as a note, if you are thinning your acrylics with water, just know that if you over thin them, you're going to have adhesion issues with the paint sticking to the canvas over decades. So a medium like this, or you can use, like, I do like the Liquitex mediums as well. They have a matte medium, a gloss medium. Something like this will, it's essentially acrylic paint but without any pigment in it. So the binder is still in there, and it's really what you should be diluting your paints with. You can use a little water, but not very much, because there have been studies that show it causes adhesion issues down the road. So there's a little tip for you. My favorite surfaces to paint on are the ampersand gesso boards or the Blick Premier canvases. I do still put a coat of the Liquitex gesso or 3 coats on these just because I'm excessive. I don't know. But both of these are my favorite. So if you want a pre-gessoed board, I suggest the ampersand and the Blick Premier. This is their professional grade canvas. It has some texture, but it's on the smoother side, and I actually prefer smoother side. So if you want really rough canvas, I can't help you with that because I don't really paint on it. But these are the 2 that I use the most for acrylic. Okay, so I think we're on to the paints now. So, oh, and then this is my really big Masterson's Stay Wet palette, and I think it might be, it is, it's moldy in there, so I'm not going to open it. I need to clean it and reset it up. I had it downstairs. For those of you who know, I fell down the stairs and I hurt my knee really bad, and I have a brace and I might need surgery, and I haven't been able to go downstairs. So I fell down the stairs over 2 months ago now, and this was down there, and I wasn't standing on my leg and doing much painting on my easel anyway, and I didn't think about bringing it up, and it is moldy again. So from sitting down there unused for two months. But this is the really large size Masterson Stay Wet palette, and it works great. If you run out of it, so there's a, here, I'll show you on the little one, because that one's not moldy and not gross to look at. You saw this in the section just a second ago on acrylic gouache. So this will come with special paper that you soak, and then that's your palette, and then there is a moist sponge underneath. If you run out of sponges, you can use like triple layer of paper towel, and then you can use tracing paper or parchment paper or even wax paper for the paper. You do not have to buy the refills unless it's convenient for you, which is how it is for me. So sometimes I buy them and sometimes I don't. So, but I do highly recommend the Masterson's Stay Wet palettes. I've tried other knockoff brands and I haven't been happy with any of them, and I've tried like 3 now, so. Alright, now we're on to the paint. My preferred brand of acrylic paint is Golden. This is my wet palette that I paint with, so when I'm painting, you can see it's all contaminated from painting. I take the lids off, and I have my Masterson's Stay Wet palette, or sometimes if I'm gonna brush just a paper tear off palette, and I will dip my brush in those and mix my colors and then put them on the canvas. When I'm done painting, I put the lid on and I shut it up tight, and they never dry out. And this is how I found to be one of the best ways for me to work with acrylics, because it cuts down on setup and cleanup time, and so I'm more willing to work with them because it's not a huge deal to set up, squeeze out all the paint, and then, you know, clean everything up when you're done. Which reminds me, I'll have to show you my brush cleaner at the end. But my preferred brand and kind of paint is the Golden Heavy Body. So this is my my Golden Heavy Body set. Again, I have a split primary palette with a few convenience colors. I like the convenience colors not so much for using, but for desaturating paint. So like if you have a really bright blue, you're going to want an orange to desaturate the paint. And, you know, obviously you can just add a little yellow and a little red and a little yellow and a little red until you get to where you want, but it's faster and quicker to just do a dab of orange. You do not have to have orange. I highly suggest you learn to mix with a limited palette before you start buying all the colors. I have a color theory video up. There's a little bit about color mixing in it. I'll link it down below in case you want to check it. But like something like this for the gouache, although I will say if you're going to learn to mix, you need like a warm red, a yellow, a blue, a white, and a black, but then you also need a primary magenta. It's way easier to learn to mix if you have the primary magenta too. So I talk about that in the color theory video. But anyway, I particularly enjoy the Golden Heavy Bodies. If they're a little too thick, I will thin them with one of my mediums. And I like to have some of the brushwork show and some of the lines. And I talked about this before, but I need new paint and I ended up not buying it. And I regretted it, but yeah, I need new paint. Maybe after Christmas. The other paint that I will sometimes use, especially if I'm using the ampersand gesso boards, is the golden fluid acrylic. You may think like, oh, that's way too small. Like, it's not. A little goes a long way. It really stretches. These are beautiful paints for painting like super realistic scenes or landscapes or animals, and anything where you want a really smooth texture, like on a smooth gesso board. I would think it would be great for portraits, stuff like that. So those are the paints, and let me just quick grab the paintbrush cleaner. For cleaning and conditioning your paintbrushes, there's nothing better than the Masters brush cleaner and preserver. You put your brush in there with a little bit of water, swish it around. Then I like to swish the brush with fresh water in the cup until it's clean. A note, if you're using cadmiums or cobalts, do not do it in your hand. They're toxic. They could possibly be absorbed in your skin. I don't recommend that you do that. This is great for acrylics, oil paints, as long as you get most of the paint out first. Anytime you need to clean or even reshape a brush, this cleaner is what I would recommend that you use. Okay, you guys, so now we are on to mixed media art, which might be my most favorite of all because I get to combine everything I love and mush it all together. We'll be talking about sketchbooks in this section too, since I do a lot of my mixed media art in them. So let's take a look at all the supplies now. This might be the biggest section, I'm not sure, so let's take a look and see what I've been using. Okay, so now we're on to the mixed media section. This is probably going to be maybe the biggest section, and might take the longest, and where I'm definitely going to need to look at my notes because there's so many things in it that I want to make sure I don't forget anything. This is also the section where we're going to cover sketchbooks, so we're going to get started with that. There are 3 sketchbooks that are essentials to me. The Moleskine Art, I don't know, I can remember if it's called the Art Journal or the Art Sketchbook, the Strathmore Mixed Media Sketchbook, and then this is all the same brand of sketchbook. These are all the Talon's Art Creation sketchbooks, and the reason I pulled all of mine is so that you can get a picture of all the different sizes and shapes and also colors that they come in. So I think this is the 5 sizes. So they have the big, I just got this one with my birthday money. They have this big size, then they have the landscape size, then they have this is just about the same as the Moleskine, and then they have these 2. This one I think is new. I never saw this till this fall. I just bought this one too. So it's a little tiny cute. It's so cute. And I'm not normally a yellow fan, but for some reason I was drawn to the yellow. These are probably what I would call the essential sketchbook. So they are, let's see, one where I don't mind showing you the inside. I don't always show everybody the inside of my sketchbooks. A lot of this is, well, just for example, like a lot of it is experimentation stuff. So like, I'm not even sure if so like I'll do like an activity like this is where it's called a blind contour drawing. You don't look at your paper, you look at what you're drawing, and you draw it without looking at your paper. So, you know, yeah. Anyway, the paper is a cream color, not super white. Let's compare it to the moleskin is also a cream color, although not quite as creamy as the Royal Talons. And I think the Strathmore will be the whitest of all, if I'm correct. Yes, is the whitest of all. So those are the shades of colors. The Royal Talons isn't really made to hold wet media. However, you can see here I've got two kinds of gouache, ink, acrylic ink, and it will ripple some. You know, you can see that it ripples some, but I don't mind that, so I do use wet media in these all the time. And the best part is they are super, super, super cheap. So I'll probably link everything to Blick, Blick Art Materials. They are a small family-owned business, and I like to support them. But Blick Art Materials is actually owned by one family and has been owned by one family since they started. And their prices are almost always the best. I do sometimes have like an affiliate commission link, although not all of mine are. I just really like them, and that's who I order from. However, they also have really good prices. So, for example, so I just went and checked. I don't want to get it wrong, but this small square size on Amazon runs about $18.20, and on Blick they're $6.40. This small rectangle size on Amazon runs $7.16. Again, $6.40 on Blick. This size on Amazon runs between $10 and $11. On Blick, it's $7.40. And this large size on Amazon runs between $16.40 and $19.40, depending on the color you want. And on Blick, it's $13.40. So, and most of the supplies are like that on Blick. Like, it's almost always the cheapest place. I will check other places, but I end up just buying from Blick. So, those are the Royal Talon sketchbooks. And then, I really do also love the, let's see if I can grab one that has something in it. This is the, moleskin. The paper is much thicker, and it does handle water a little bit better, water media a little bit better. And the paper is thicker, and it's just a little bit brighter and whiter. However, they run $20. So, and sometimes it's worth it. Obviously, I have several, and I do continue to keep buying them. But for everyday stuff, I tend to use the Royal Talons because I'm less precious with it. And then I just found this one recently this year, but it's for sure going to be one that I'm going to be using again and again. It is 100% cotton, and it is so far, I haven't painted these, but it is so far my favorite watercolor sketchbook that I've found so far. And I'm definitely going to be getting this in like the bigger size and doing a lot more work in these. So that is the sketchbook portion. Now let's move on to the materials. Okay, now hopefully I'm not going to leave anything out. But again, these are the materials that I'm using over and over, not something that I'm only using some of the time or something that I've recently found and haven't had time to test out. These are my tried and true, most loved supplies. And I'm trying to find... Okay, so for sketching, mechanical sketching pencils, I like the Pentel Graph Gear. I have them in the 0.5 and the 0.7. The 0.5 is currently with my other sketchbook in the other room. If I'm sketching something with a mechanical pencil, it's going to be one of these. It's the ones I use the most. They're really inexpensive on Blick, and I enjoy them very much. I guess I'm not going to get into like erasers and stuff in this video, because that would just be a lot. However, I did recently get myself the Blackwing pencils, and I do enjoy them very, very much. So far, I'm not positive yet if they're a buy again, but I am really enjoying them right now, so special shout out to them. And then speaking of pencils, talking about pencils, so actually, let's talk about watercolor supplies I use with watercolor. So when I'm doing line work for watercolor painting, if I want line work that is going to go under the painting, I will use, let's see, let's get out all the different supplies. Do I have some blacks there? Yep. Okay, so if I'm doing line work under a watercolor painting, this is what I'm going to be using for under the painting. So I will often sketch out paintings directly on the paper with the Prismacolor Color Erase pencils. My favorite colors, they're not in the box because they're my favorite to sketch with, are the indigo blue and the terracotta. They erase pretty darn well for a colored pencil, and it doesn't reactivate with water like a graphite pencil would, and it also is not as jarring sometimes as a gray line. There's lots of colors. You can buy them open stock on Blick, so just one pencil at a time for like $1 something, maybe even less than $1. You don't have to buy the whole box. But they're a great pencil. They're probably not light fast, but it doesn't matter because they're under the painting. If I'm going to be inking with a fine liner, I will use the Sakura Pigma. They are my favorite. I've tried many different brands and I just keep coming back to them. I have them in black, blue, and brown, and in all the different ranges of sizes. You can buy them in sets or you can buy them in individual open stock on Blick as well. I will also sometimes use a dip pen. This is my favorite dip pen. This is the, I can never say it right, Taikakawa dip pen with the Comic G nibs. Those are my favorite, although I am testing a new nib, so I'll let you know what I think of it. And then my favorite ink, I don't know why, I have like bottles of black everywhere, but not in this room apparently, but the Dr. P.H. Martin's Bombay India ink in black is one I use probably the most, and then second most common is the Van Dyke brown. So that would be what I would use for if I was doing like a pen and ink with a line and wash. I can't talk today. A line and wash, watercolor painting, or well, anything. I'll often do the underlay or a sketch in one of those, and then come in with like the watercolor, gouache, or whatever. Now, if we're talking about putting stuff on top of things, then I have 2 brands of colored pencil that are my favorite for doing line work on top or coming in to do shading and detail. And they are the Faber-Castell Polychromos or the Caran d'Ache Luminance. The Caran d'Ache Luminance, they are all light fast rated. So if you're making something and selling it, these are all light fast. The Polychromos do have a few shades of pinks and purples, but not very many that are not light fast, which I have removed from my set. This is just one drawer of them. I have 2 drawers. But I have removed those from my set. So you may ask, why do I have 2 different brands? Well, this is an oil-based pencil and this is a wax-based pencil. So this will, you can sharpen it to a finer point. You can get thinner lines. It's a little bit harder. It's good for thin line work and details. Whereas this is more of a soft, creamy, waxy pencil where you can get a lot more shading or highlights or texture or whatever you would like on top of your watercolor or gouache. And then talking about putting things on top of your watercolor or gouache, my other most loved thing to do is my Neo Colors 2. This is half the set. I have it divided into like warms and cools. I have a handful of Neo Color ones and the Neo Pastels that I'm experimenting with, but again, not a tried and true supply yet. Haven't decided yet how I feel about it, whereas these I love and use all the time. I think my other set probably looks a little bit more worn. I will often take some of these out plein air with me. Obviously, you see these get more use. I think this set gets more use than the other set, but they are great for texture and detail and highlights and shadows. Okay, so like I was saying, my battery died, sorry. These are great for the final like textures or shadows or highlights on your mixed media piece. And if you put something down that's too harsh or too stark, you can always come in and soften it with a brush and some water because they're water soluble, which makes them really nice. You don't have to worry you're gonna ruin anything. And then if I don't come in with gouache to do the final highlights or whatever, or touch things up, I will often use a Signo Uniball white gel pen. This is by far the best white gel pen I've tried, and I've tried like 6 or 7 brands now. This is the one I keep coming back to and buying over and over. You can buy them individually, open stock on Blick. And then something else that I will often use in a mixed media piece is pan pastels. Again, this is not my whole set, just a little selection, but I really like to sometimes on top of watercolor, or I'll start with these and then layer some of these other things over it, but it gives a really nice soft grainy texture that I really like. So I wanted to mention those as well. If I'm doing mixed media, just a quick note about the paper, I will use any of the papers that I've already listed, not anything different. I would use the probably the hot press watercolor, not the cold press, or the Bristol paper is what I would use for a mixed media piece. And I think, I'm looking at my list just to make sure. Oh, pastel pencils, I almost forgot. Okay, and then I will often come back in and do some final details with my pastel pencils, and I have 2 brands of those as well. Oh, I'm trying to reach the other jar. Okay, we have the Stabilo Carbothello pastel pencils and the Faber-Castell Pitt pastel pencils. I like the Stabilo Carbothello better. They're a little softer. The texture is nicer. They don't feel grainy on the paper. However, between the 2 sets, so pastel pencils are not super light fast. So if you're looking for light fastness, this is all that is light fast in the, and that's not even in the right spot. This is all that's light fast in the Stabilo Carbothello big box set, their biggest set that they make. This is all that's light fast. So to get some of those, again, the purples and the pinks and some of the greens, I add in the Faber-Castell pastel pencils. However, they are harder and just not as fun to work with, but I use them because between the 2 of them, I have a full mix of range of colors. So you guys, I remember when I first started out, and I was so intimidated by all the amazing artists out there. I felt like I didn't have the skills or the talent to create something truly special or something that stood out. But as I started to build my art supply box and experiment with different techniques, I started to realize that it isn't about being the best artist. It's about finding my own unique voice and style. Once you figure that out, you're going to be heads and tails above everybody else. Also, that reminds me, you guys, if you would be interested in seeing a video about how to find your artistic style or voice, could you drop me a comment and let me know, please? I'd really appreciate it. I never know what to do for videos or if you are interested or not. So, but you know, I really want to encourage you to play with your supplies, use them, get to know them, master them. I want to inspire you to experiment, to take risks, and to find your own creative voice. When you have the right tools and the right mindset, there's really no limit to what you can create. So let's recap. We've talked about the essential items that make up my art supply toolkit and how they helped me take my art to the next level. I hope you've been inspired to start building your own art supply toolkit and to explore the possibilities of what you can create. Before I want to go, I want to invite you to share your own favorite art supplies in the comments below. What's the one thing you can't live without in your art practice? What would you need on a desert island? Desert island? Deserted island? You know what I mean. Let me know, and I might just feature your favorite supply in a future video. Thanks so much for joining me today, and I'll see you in the next video. Until next time, happy creating!